The angry snake coiled tightly around Luna the Labrador. But then, Luna did something so unexpected that witnesses could hardly believe their eyes. A sudden, eerie whimper broke the silence of the quiet suburban neighborhood. It was a sound that didn't belong in this peaceful environment, a cry full of fear and distress. It was Tuesday morning, and the source of the disturbing noise lay behind the tall wooden fence of 42 Maple Street, the backyard, which had been as quiet as any other on the block just moments ago, now concealed a frightening scene. Jake, one of the local garbage collectors, was making his weekly rounds. He had just emptied the trash can at the curb and was about to roll it back to its place when the dog's whimpering made him pause. Something about it made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. It wasn't the usual barking of an excited dog or the howling of a lonely soul. This sound was different. It sounded urgent, almost pleading. Curiosity and concern battled briefly in Jake's mind before he decided to investigate. A quick glance at his watch told him he was behind schedule, but the nagging feeling that something was wrong wouldn't let go. With a quick look over his shoulder to make sure no one was watching, he opened the gate and stepped into the backyard. The scene that greeted him was like something from a nature documentary gone horribly wrong. In the middle of the lawn lay a large black Labrador, motionless, its body rigid with tension. Around the dog's torso was an enormous snake, its scaly skin glistening in the morning light as it tightened its grip. Jake held his breath. The snake, as he would later learn, was a python that had escaped from a nearby exotic pet owner. It was easily 6 feet long, its muscular body wrapped around the Labrador like a vice. The dog's eyes were wide with fear, its tail tucked firmly between its legs as it let out another pitiful sound. "Holy shit," whispered Jake, his voice barely more than a breath. He stood, rooted to the spot, his mind desperately trying to process the surreal scene before him. The snake's head lay close to the Labrador's neck, its forked tongue flicking in and out as it tasted the air. The Labrador seemed to be in a state of shock, neither fighting nor fleeing, just trembling beneath the mighty coils of the snake. Jake's eyes darted around the yard, searching for anything that might help. Then he discovered something that made his heart sink even further. Not far away, 3 black Labrador puppies huddled close together, whimpering softly as if sensing their mother's distress. Though they were too young to truly understand the danger, the situation had just become significantly more serious. This wasn't just any dog in danger, it was a mother whose puppies depended on her. Jake's thoughts raced. Should he try to intervene? Call for help? He had no experience with snakes, let alone one of this size. One wrong move could put not only the dog, but also himself in danger. Yet doing nothing wasn't an option either. For a moment he thought about informing Mrs. Allison, the Labrador's owner, but quickly dismissed the idea. He remembered the frail elderly woman he had seen shuffling to her mailbox last week. She was probably not capable of helping in such a situation, and the sight of her beloved pet in such distress could break her heart. Jake remained frozen, paralyzed by indecision, but then his eyes met those of the Labrador. Despite the visible fear in the dog's trembling body, there was an amazing determination in her brown eyes. This look snapped Jake out of his stupor. He knew he had to act, and act quickly. With one last look at the terrible scene, Jake pulled out his phone. His fingers trembled slightly as he dialed 911. "What is your emergency?" A calm voice answered on the other end. Jake took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the intertwined animals. "You're not going to believe this," he began, "but I urgently need help. A large snake has a dog and puppies. It's hard to explain. Please send someone quickly to 42 Maple Street. We need animal control. And probably a veterinarian." As he hung up, Jake steeled himself for what was to come. Though he couldn't help the dog himself, he had instinctively made the right decision. At the same time, he had unknowingly prevented Mrs. Allison from seeing her beloved pet in such a desperate situation. The elderly woman, a widow in her late 70s, found new purpose and joy in the company of her faithful canine friend. Luna had entered Mrs. Allison's life shortly after her husband's death. The black Labrador, then still a puppy, was a gift from Mrs. Allison's children who were worried about their mother living alone. Luna proved to be far more than just a pet. She became Mrs. Allison's constant companion, confidante, and a source of joy. Every day you could see Mrs. Allison sitting on a bench in the local park with Luna faithfully by her side. She would tell anyone who would listen how Luna had given her a new lease on life and a reason to get up in the morning and venture out into the world. But it wasn't just Mrs. Allison who benefited from Luna's presence. The whole neighborhood had grown to love the pair. Children would often stop to pet Luna on their way to school, and other dog owners would chat with Mrs. Allison during their walks. Luna had become a fixture in the community, her wagging tail and friendly nature a welcome sight for all. The arrival of Luna's puppies a few weeks ago had been cause for celebration on Maple Street. Mrs. Allison was overjoyed and proudly showed the 3 black bundles of fur to everyone who passed by, her face beaming with pride. The puppies brought a new measure of excitement and purpose to Mrs. Allison's life, giving her even more reasons to smile and share her joy with others. However, Mrs. Allison had no idea that her beloved Luna was now facing an unexpected and dangerous situation in her own backyard. The peaceful morning she had expected had taken a dramatic turn, one that would test Luna's instincts and resilience in ways Mrs. Allison couldn't even imagine. Meanwhile, Jake forced himself to focus on the immediate problem, though his thoughts kept drifting to his garbage truck. He was supposed to complete the shift with Michael, his colleague, but Michael had gone to the hospital that morning for an early screening appointment and hadn't made it back in time. They had agreed to meet later in the morning. Jake pulled himself away from these thoughts and focused again on Luna and the snake coiled around her. Cautiously, he moved closer to examine the snake. It was thick and muscular, its scales forming a brown and light brown pattern that would have provided perfect camouflage in a natural environment. As Jake observed, he noticed something peculiar. Although the snake was clearly wrapped tightly around Luna, it wasn't constricting further. It seemed to be merely holding on, its head moving slowly, forked tongue flicking in and out as if trying to assess the situation. Luna remained surprisingly calm. Her initial whimpering had ceased, and although she was still clearly tense, she wasn't panicking or trying to fight off the snake. It was as if a deep, instinctive part of her understood that sudden movements could provoke the predator. Jake's thoughts raced. How could he separate the 2 animals? Every option seemed risky. If he tried to pull the snake off, it might tighten its grip or strike. Yet, simply waiting for animal control could take too long. Who knew how long Luna could endure this stress? Carefully, Jake took a step closer and spoke in a quiet, soothing voice. "Easy, Luna. Good girl. Stay calm." He wasn't sure if his words were meant more for the dog or for himself. As he inched closer, he noticed a garden hose coiled near the back porch. An idea began forming in his head. Perhaps he could spray the snake with water to disorient it and loosen its grip. It was a risky attempt, but less dangerous than physical intervention. Slowly and carefully, Jake moved toward the hose, never taking his eyes off the intertwined animals, ready to jump back at the slightest sign of movement. Jake's hand closed around the hose, and he began slowly moving toward Luna and the snake. He turned the nozzle slightly so a small stream of water flowed to test the pressure. The sound of running water seemed unnaturally loud in the tense silence of the backyard. Just as Jake was about to aim the hose at the snake, he heard the sound of approaching sirens in the distance. The wailing of sirens broke through the silence of the backyard. Jake's grip on the hose tightened, his eyes darting between Luna and the sound of approaching help. But as the sirens drew nearer, the situation took an alarming turn. Startled by the unfamiliar noise, the snake began to tighten its coils around Luna's body. The Labrador's initial composure shattered under the increasing pressure. her once stoic eyes now filling with tears of pain. A soft whimper escaped her throat, barely audible over the growing sirens but heartbreaking to Jake's ears. Luna's body tensed, her muscles trembling under the snake's tightening grip. Jake could see the fear and discomfort in every line of Luna's face, her earlier resolve quickly fading, her breathing becoming labored, each breath a struggle against the snake's crushing embrace. Two uniformed officers quickly entered the backyard, their movements swift but cautious. "Sir, please step back slowly," one of the officers instructed Jake, their voice firm but reassuring. "You need to clear the area so we can work." Jake nodded carefully and stepped back, watching as the officers quietly conferred, their expressions serious as they discussed their approach. Finally, the lead officer, a woman with short gray hair, turned to Jake. "Sir, can you tell us how long the snake has been wrapped around the dog?" Jake swallowed hard. "I found them like this maybe 20 minutes ago, but I don't know how long it was before that." The second officer, a younger man named Tim, carefully approached Luna and the snake, holding a long pole with a loop at the end. "Easy, girl," he murmured softly and reassuringly. "We're here to help. Just stay calm." The snake, noticing the new presence, tightened its coils once again. Luna let out a cry of pain, her body trembling with the effort to remain still. "We need to act quickly," said the lead officer urgently. "The snake is putting too much pressure on her ribcage. We don't have time for sedation." Tim nodded resolutely. "I'll try to get the loop around the snake's head. If I can secure it, we might be able to unwrap it without further endangering the dog." With utmost caution, Tim approached as the snake's head raised, its tongue flicking out to taste the air. With a quick movement, Tim managed to get the loop over the snake's head. "Got it," he called out, gradually beginning to free Luna from the snake's grip. "That's it, girl," encouraged the lead officer, kneeling gently beside Luna's head. "Just hold on a little longer. You're doing great." With each loosened coil, Luna's breathing became slightly easier, her body slowly relaxing. Finally, the snake was completely separated from Luna. With one last careful maneuver, Tim secured the snake's head and prepared to place it in a specially designated container. But suddenly, the snake's body began to shiver and writhe, making it difficult for Tim to maintain control. What happened next was barely believable. Luna, who moments ago had barely been conscious, suddenly sprang up with a burst of adrenaline, her eyes, which had never left the snake, blazing with fear and determination. Before anyone could react, she lunged forward, her jaws clamping firmly onto the snake's tail, and she shook her head violently. Luna was trying to tear the snake in two, her powerful jaws working furiously while the snake thrashed wildly, caught between Tim's grip and Luna's teeth. For a moment, it seemed Luna might succeed in her desperate attack, but just as quickly as the attack began, Luna's strength left her. She released her grip on the snake and collapsed to the ground, her body trembling with exhaustion. The sudden burst of energy had depleted her last reserves. Tim quickly recovered from his shock and used the snake's momentary disorientation to fully secure it in the container. His partner immediately turned her attention to the now motionless Labrador. Jake rushed to Luna's side, dropping to his knees and gently stroking her head. "Oh, Luna," he choked out, his voice a mixture of awe and concern. The lead officer stood up, her face marked with relief and growing worry. "We need to get her to a vet immediately," she said firmly. The last burst of energy could have worsened any internal injuries. "We need to make sure there's no serious damage from the constriction or her sudden movement." Jake nodded, but suddenly remembered something. "What about her puppies?" he asked, concern clear in his voice. The officer glanced at the pen where the puppies were whimpering. "The puppies appear unharmed and are too young to be unnecessarily separated from their environment. It's best if they stay here. Can you make sure someone looks after them until we return?" "Jake," nodded determinedly. Of course, I'll take care of it right away. As the officers carefully loaded Luna into the animal control transport, Jake couldn't help but admire the dog's strength and bravery. Despite the ordeal she had just endured, her gaze never left her puppies. A mixture of worry and longing filled her eyes as the transport doors closed. With the immediate crisis over, Jake knew he had to inform Mrs. Allison about what had happened. His heart heavy with the weight of the news, he approached the front door and rang the bell. After a moment, Mrs. Allison opened the door, her hair slightly disheveled, her eyes heavy with sleep. She blinked several times, obviously woken from a nap. Jake told her about the shocking events, and with each word, her face grew paler. When he finished, she leaned visibly shaken against the doorframe. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Poor Luna. I can't believe this happened. Thank you for being there, Jake. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been." Jake assured her that the animal control officers had said Luna appeared stable, but they needed to take her to the vet to make sure. He mentioned that the puppies had been left behind and would need care until Luna's return. Mrs. Allison nodded and collected herself. "Of course, I'll look after them. It's the least I can do after everything you've done." Together, they went to the backyard to check on the puppies. As Mrs. Allison knelt beside the pen, Jake's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw Michael's name on the screen. "Jake, where are you?" Michael's voice sounded worried and impatient. "I'm at the next intersection waiting for you. Is everything okay?" Jake glanced at Mrs. Allison, who was gently soothing the whimpering puppies. He felt torn between his work responsibilities and his desire to ensure everything was settled here. "Yes, I'm fine," he answered. "There was an emergency with a neighbor's dog, but it's under control. Now, I'll be there in a few minutes." After hanging up, Jake turned to Mrs. Allison. "I have to go. My work colleague is waiting. Will you be okay with the puppies?" Mrs. Allison looked up from the pen, a weak smile on her face. "We'll manage, Jake. Thank you again for everything. Go on. I'll call you if there's any news about Luna." With a final glance at the puppies, Jake hurried from the yard. As he jogged to the intersection where Michael was waiting, his head was a whirlwind of emotion and thoughts. The image of Luna, brave and protective even in her distress, had burned itself into his memory. He fervently hoped she would recover quickly and soon be reunited with her. Puppies. Nature never ceases to surprise us with its unpredictable turns. Just when we think we understand animal behavior, they show us their hidden strengths and instincts. Have you ever experienced an animal doing something completely unexpected in a crisis? Click subscribe to read more incredible stories. See you in the next one.